I am 33, and my name is Barbara. That rainy night was the moment I finally broke free from 4 years of controlling behavior. My husband simply dropped me out of the car on an empty rural highway, 35 miles from our home in Denver. Soaked to the bone in the cold rain, I couldn't have imagined that this humiliating moment was actually the beginning of my liberation. As he drove away, he was sure he was teaching me another lesson in obedience. But by leaving me there alone, he made his last and biggest mistake. He had no idea what I was capable of. My career had always been my top priority. Before I turned 30, I became the head of marketing at Innovate Dynamics, one of Denver's most promising IT companies. My workday was filled with strategy meetings, brainstorming sessions with the team, and a deep sense of satisfaction from launching successful projects. I loved my work and the financial independence it gave me. I first met Mason at a large industry conference in Austin. I had just finished my presentation on our new project's results when he approached me. His questions were not perfunctory but deep and thoughtful. It was clear that he had truly listened and was interested in my work. He was different from most people I met at such events. His gaze held genuine interest, not a search for personal gain. "That was a brilliant presentation," he said with a confident smile. "Your approach, combining analytics with a compelling story, is exactly what I'm looking for." Mason turned out to be the marketing director at a competing company. He was a bit older than me, and his impeccable appearance spoke of success. He suggested we discuss the details over coffee, but our conversation stretched into dinner and became the most captivating talk I'd had in years. Our relationship developed at an incredible pace. Within a couple of weeks, we were inseparable on weekends, spending time either in my Denver apartment or in his luxurious place with a panoramic view of the Rocky Mountains. In the middle of a busy workweek, he might unexpectedly send my favorite lunch directly to my office or share a link to an article that was useful for my current project. It seemed he understood and respected the demands of my job like no one else. "I admire how passionate you are about your work," he would often say, massaging my shoulders after a particularly stressful day. "Together, we can move mountains." Looking back, I realized there were subtle signs I ignored even then. For example, how he might casually pick up my phone when it vibrated with messages. Or his questions about why a certain meeting ran late. The slight, almost imperceptible tension in his voice when I mentioned male colleagues. "I'm just worried about you," he would say when I tried to point it out. In our business, too many people have a hidden agenda. Much later, I learned that Mason came from a very wealthy family. His father owned a large chain of car dealerships in 3 states, and from childhood, Mason was used to getting whatever he wanted. His parents had huge expectations and didn't forgive the slightest misstep. This upbringing shaped him into a person obsessed with creating a perfect image, behind which were deep-seated insecurities and self-doubt. Just 6 months after we met, he proposed to me during a spontaneous trip to Aspen. The ring was incredible, the setting like a fairy tale. I said yes, without hesitation, confident that I had finally found a partner who valued my ambitions as much as his own. Our wedding became one of the most talked about events of the season in Denver. 320 guests, a reception at the most prestigious country club, and a honeymoon in Bora Bora. I was so caught up in the romantic whirlwind that I didn't even notice how Mason gradually took over all the organizational matters, gently replacing my ideas with better options. After the honeymoon, the changes began subtly. Mason started calling me several times a day at work, just to check in. Then he suggested we sync our work calendars, explaining it would make it easier for us to coordinate our plans. When I enthusiastically talked about a new project, he might frown slightly and say, "You're already working yourself to the bone. Are you sure you need this?" Around the same time, a new employee, Ethan, joined Innovate Dynamics. He was hired as the head of security after an unpleasant data leak at the company. He was tall, very reserved, and gave the impression of a true professional. Ethan started by implementing new security protocols. At our first meeting, he was extremely composed and barely smiled, clearly explaining the rules for my department. Marketing works with the most sensitive information about future products, he said. Your team needs to be twice as careful. I remember thinking to myself how unlike Mason he was. If Mason was the epitome of charm, Ethan was one of calm and few words. I couldn't have imagined the role he would eventually play in my life. The first major conflict with Mason happened just 3 months after our wedding. I had to miss dinner with his important business partners due to a massive server failure that could have brought down our entire corporate website. I stayed with the IT department until 10 in the evening to fix the problem. When I finally got home, Mason was waiting for me in the dark living room. You put me in a very awkward position tonight, he said quietly. Mason, I messaged you that we had an emergency, I replied, utterly exhausted. If we hadn't fixed it, our entire new campaign would have failed. Well, your priorities are clear to me, he said coldly and went to sleep in the guest room. The next morning, he acted as if nothing had happened. He brought me breakfast and flowers and apologized. I'm sorry, I was out of line yesterday. I just wanted everyone to see what an amazing wife I have. This apology started a pattern in our relationship. He would cross a line, punish me with his silence, and then win me back with a grand gesture. With each time, his control over my schedule and social circle grew stronger. I started making excuses for him. He wasn't controlling me, he was caring. He wasn't jealous, he was just very devoted. I convinced myself I was lucky to have such an attentive husband. How wrong I was. The more successful I became at work, the more Mason showed his displeasure. His former support turned into total control. He demanded immediate responses to his messages and a report on every meeting that ran late. Any objections I had were met with the phrase, I'm just worried you're working too much. Someone has to take care of you. The culmination came 4 months after the wedding when he demanded access to my work email, supposedly to help me with my schedule. I refused, citing corporate rules. In response, he didn't speak to me for several days, making comments about secrets and a lack of trust in our marriage. The turning point was the Christmas party at Innovate Dynamics. My department had just landed the biggest contract of the year, and our CEO, Robert, was publicly praising my work in front of the entire management team. That's when Mason intervened. Barbara has put too much into this project, he said, interrupting Robert and holding me a bit too tightly around the waist. I'm barely seeing my wife anymore. Robert, I'm afraid I'll have to take her away from you for good if this keeps up. In the awkward silence that followed, you could hear glasses clinking. Robert forced a polite smile and changed the subject, but my authority had been undermined in front of the whole company. You humiliated me in front of everyone, I told him in the car on the way home. I was just joking, he replied dismissively. I thought it was sweet. You take everything too personally. 2 weeks after that party, I was promoted to Vice President of Marketing. But instead of congratulations, Mason started questioning if I could handle the responsibility. He suggested I think about our family plans before accepting the offer. When I reminded him that we hadn't planned on having children anytime soon, he accused me of breaking our marital agreements. Despite this, I accepted the promotion. That night, he returned home after midnight, saying he needed to be alone to think about our shared priorities. Then, Mason began subtly turning me against my loved ones. My college friend, Olivia, was, in his opinion, too pessimistic. My sister, Chloe, was a bad influence because of her recent divorce. And my mother, Emily, called too often. Each such comment was accompanied by advice to limit my contact with them. I'm just protecting our marriage from negative outside influences, he explained. The next step was controlling our finances. Despite my very high salary, Mason insisted on opening a joint bank account, which he took complete control of. Soon, he started commenting on every purchase I made, whether it was a new business suit or a gift for a colleague. Why do you need another jacket? He might ask, or, I see you've been to that coffee shop 3 times this week. The final straw was an incident at a dinner party we hosted for his business partners. I shared a funny story about one of our clients, and the guests laughed. Everyone except Mason. He waited for the laughter to die down and then said in a cold tone, "Barbara has a talent for interrupting when important things are being discussed. She gets carried away and forgets her manners." An awkward silence fell over the table. One of his partners, David, looked embarrassed, and his wife gave me a sympathetic glance. I excused myself and went to the kitchen, where I tried to hold back tears while preparing dessert. Around the same time, Ethan, our head of security, implemented a new rule: every top manager had to have a personal consultation with him. During our meeting, he was, as always, reserved and professional, but also very attentive to detail. "High-ranking positions can attract unwanted attention," he explained. "We need to make sure you're safe not just in the office but outside it as well." Something about his calm demeanor was reassuring, and to my surprise, I told him a bit more about my personal life than I should have. He listened carefully without judgment. "Your safety isn't just a work matter," he told me as I was leaving. "Don't forget that." The situation with Mason reached a critical point when I came out of the shower and found him with my phone in his hands. He was scrolling through my work chats. "Who is Mark?" he asked in an icy tone. "Why is he messaging you about work at 10 p.m.? "He's a new project manager. We have an important presentation tomorrow morning," I explained, feeling a wave of humiliation wash over me. "You should have let me know," he said, throwing the phone on the bed. "From now on, no secrets." The very next day, under the pretext of safety, Mason connected my phone to a shared account with a location tracking feature. From then on, he knew my every move. He would send messages if I drove into an unfamiliar neighborhood and call if I stayed at the office even a few minutes late. "I get worried," he would say in response to my outrage. "What's wrong with me making sure my wife is okay?" For our anniversary, we planned a trip to Santa Fe. I was looking forward to the weekend, hoping to get a break from the constant tension. But when I came downstairs in the morning, I saw Mason unpacking my already packed suitcase. "The trip's off," he said calmly, pulling out an evening dress. "If you were planning to wear this, you must have had other plans for this trip." "But that's for the restaurant you booked yourself," I replied, confused. "I didn't approve of your choice," he said, gesturing at my things. "We'll go when you learn how to prioritize correctly." I watched him rummage through my belongings, and at that moment, I had a clear realization: my marriage was unhealthy. The man I had fallen in love with had vanished, and in his place was someone I was beginning to fear. The situation escalated when my mother, Emily, was hospitalized with pneumonia. She lives in Colorado Springs, only a couple of hours away, but when I told Mason I had to go, he was cold. "Your mother always exaggerates," he said. "Let Chloe handle it this time. We have an important presentation coming up." When I insisted, he agreed but set conditions. I could only go for one night and had to call him every 2 hours to check in. The entire trip, he bombarded me with messages. I delayed one of the calls by just 10 minutes, and he called me directly in the hospital room. I was talking to the doctor, I tried to explain. "We had an agreement," he cut me off. After returning from Colorado Springs, my anxiety reached its peak. I felt like I was walking on a minefield in my own home. That's when I decided to reach out to Ethan, asking him for a coffee meeting under the pretext of discussing additional security measures. We met at a small cafe not far from the office. I spoke vaguely, describing my concerns about my safety at home, never once mentioning Mason's name. Ethan listened intently, and I felt that he understood everything without me saying a word. "Sometimes threats come from where you least expect them," he noted cautiously. Then he handed me his personal business card, with a phone number written on the back. "If you need help after hours, this line is completely secure. Just call." I put the card in my wallet, feeling both relief that I had a plan B and dread at the thought that I might need it. That same evening, Mason found the receipt from the cafe in my purse. "Coffee with Ethan," he read aloud, his voice frighteningly quiet. "With your head of security." Are you having an affair, Barbara? It was a work meeting about security, I tried to explain, keeping my voice steady. At a cafe? Do you think I'll believe you? He threw the receipt in my face. No more one-on-one meetings with men. Is that clear? The argument escalated, and at one point, he slammed my laptop shut so hard that the screen cracked. What a shame, he said with a cold smirk. Looks like you'll have to work from home tomorrow. Under my supervision. That night, after he fell asleep, I took action. I created a password-protected file on my work computer where I started logging all the incidents with dates and details. I also began secretly recording our conversations using an app Ethan had recommended for documenting security breaches. Following his advice, I prepared an emergency plan. I bought a second phone and hid it in my desk drawer. On it, I installed taxi-hailing apps that Mason had long since deleted from my main phone, claiming they were a waste of money. Mason's verbal attacks became more cruel. When I discovered he had canceled my credit card without a word to me and asked him about it, he exploded. You're acting irrationally, he yelled. I'm trying to save our money from your impulsive spending, and you're making me out to be the villain. Maybe if you tried harder to be a good wife instead of chasing a career, I wouldn't have to handle everything for you. I suggested we try marriage counseling, hoping an outside professional could influence him. Mason refused at first, but then he agreed. We went to exactly 2 sessions. After the therapist gently pointed out his need for control, Mason declared that she was incompetent and biased. She's clearly against traditional family values, he fumed on the way home. I'm not going to pay to be humiliated there. We never went back. Work remained my only safe place, but soon it was threatened too. We were preparing for a major product launch, and my whole team often stayed late at the office. It was during this time that Mason started showing up at my work without warning. He would bring dinner under the pretense of caring for me, but I knew he was really there to check who I was with and what I was doing. The breaking point was reached when I found a spyware program on my phone. It was copying all my messages and sending them to Mason. I only discovered it thanks to a digital security training session Ethan had conducted. When I secretly showed him my find, he became extremely serious. This isn't just an invasion of privacy, he said. This could be illegal. He helped me get a new, clean phone under the corporate security protocol and taught me how to protect my data. But most importantly, he helped me create an action plan in case of danger. You need options that will work instantly, he explained, showing me how to set up emergency calls with a single button. When I confronted Mason about the spyware, he didn't even deny it. Instead, he twisted everything with a chilling ease. I installed it because I was sure you were cheating on me, he said calmly. And, as you can see, I was right. Why else would you have so many secrets with that security guard of yours? Ethan is my colleague, he was just doing his job, I insisted. You can lie to yourself all you want, Mason replied in an icy tone. But not to me. That evening, for the first time, I brought up the topic of separation. For a moment, I saw a flash of fury in Mason's eyes, which was immediately replaced by despair and tears. I'm under so much pressure at work right now, he sobbed. My father is threatening to take everything away if I don't handle it. I know I've been difficult, but I won't survive if I lose you too. Please, I'll change. I'll see a professional. Against my gut feeling and Ethan's advice, I agreed to give him one last chance. It was a decision I would regret very, very soon. 3 weeks passed since that conversation. Nothing had essentially changed, Mason had simply changed his tactics. Now, instead of direct control, he used manipulation and guilt. Every time I tried to bring up an uncomfortable topic, he would immediately remind me how hard things were at work and how he had opened up to me. In the end, I felt guilty, as if I were attacking him at his most vulnerable moment. The final straw that destroyed our marriage started with a dinner. It was an important meeting with a potential client, Daniel Carter, and Mason insisted on coming with me. "I'm your husband, and I should support you," he said, but I could clearly hear the desire to control, not to help, in his voice. The dinner was at one of Denver's finest restaurants. Daniel Carter came with his wife, Stephanie, and at first, Mason was incredibly charming. But as soon as the conversation turned to business, he started constantly interrupting me. "Barbara likes to overcomplicate things," he declared after I laid out our strategy. When Daniel asked about our plans for the international market, Mason answered for me, and incorrectly at that. I had to correct him delicately. "Mason means our old strategy," I said politely. "We're working differently now." I could feel his anger building. And when they served us dessert, he placed his hand on my thigh under the table and squeezed it painfully, without changing the smile on his face. This was his signal. I knew a difficult conversation was waiting for me. The entire drive home was filled with an icy silence. Our route was out of the city, towards the foothills, and with every mile, the landscape outside the window became more desolate. The weather seemed to reflect our mood. A light drizzle quickly turned into a real downpour. "You interrupted me 5 times, Mason finally hissed, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. "I had to give him accurate information," I replied, trying to sound as calm as possible. "Daniel Carter is discussing a multi-million-dollar contract with us." "You made a fool out of me," he roared, slamming the gas pedal on the wet road. "You enjoy humiliating me, don't you?" At that moment, my phone rang. Ethan's name appeared on the screen. In any other situation, I would have dismissed the call, knowing Mason's state. But just that day, a company-wide warning about a potential hacking attempt had been sent out, and Ethan was handling it. "I need to answer," I said quickly. "This could be urgent, about security." I took the call without giving Mason a chance to object. "Barbara, we've detected an attempted breach on the marketing server," Ethan got straight to the point. "I need confirmation that you haven't given your login credentials to anyone, including family members." I could feel Mason's heavy gaze on me. "No, my data is secure," I replied as professionally as possible. "Is someone with you?" Ethan asked, obviously sensing the tension in my voice. "Yes," I answered shortly. "Can you speak freely?" "Not right now." There was a pause on the other end. "Understood," he said. "Contact security as soon as you have a chance. It's important." As soon as I hung up, Mason swerved to the side of the road, and the car skidded on the wet asphalt. "That was him, wasn't it?" Mason asked in a voice that sent a chill down my spine. "Your security guard boyfriend, calling to check up on you?" "It was work, Mason, we have a data leak." "Stop lying," he yelled, hitting the dashboard. "I saw the way he looked at you at that corporate picnic. Don't take me for a fool." He swerved back onto the highway, picking up speed despite the pouring rain. "You've been undermining my authority for months," he continued to shout. "Making me look incompetent, disappearing into the office at night, secret calls. Do you think I don't see what's going on?" The rain became so heavy that the wipers could barely keep up. We were far out of town on a dark highway in the middle of a forest, about 35 miles from Denver. There wasn't a single light around. Suddenly, Mason slammed on the brakes, turning onto a barely visible gravel shoulder. The jerk threw me forward, and the seatbelt dug into my shoulder. "I've had it," he said, turning his whole body toward me. "You're quitting your job. You're cutting off all contact with Ethan. And you're going to live in this marriage by my rules. Period." I looked at him and, for the first time, truly saw him. The charming man I had married was just a mask. In front of me sat a person consumed by insecurity and a thirst for power. "No," I said quietly but firmly. The word hung in the air. Mason was genuinely stunned, as if he had never even considered that answer. "What did you say?" he hissed. I said, "No," I repeated. "I'm not quitting my job. I'm not going to stop talking to my colleagues." And I'm not staying in a marriage built on fear and control. His face contorted with rage. Get out, he said. What? Get out of the car. Right now. He leaned over me and flung the passenger door open. Streams of cold rain poured into the car. Mason, we're in the middle of nowhere, and it's a downpour. You need to learn who's in charge here. Get out yourself, or I'll help you. I believed he was capable of it. I unbuckled my seatbelt and stepped out into the wall of rain. In a matter of seconds, I was soaked to the bone. Mason leaned over to me. Walk home. Maybe in 35 miles, you'll have time to think about your behavior. He slammed the door shut. A moment later, his car's red tail lights disappeared into the darkness. I stood in the rain, and as the water ran down my face, I felt not fear but a strange sense of calm. It was at that moment that everything fell into place. No more doubts. No more second chances. No more excuses. By leaving me here on this dark road, Mason had given me my freedom. Despite the downpour, I took out my second phone from its hiding place. Ethan had advised me to always keep it on me. My fingers were trembling from the cold, but I managed to press the emergency call button we had set up. Ethan answered almost instantly. Barbara, what happened? Mason dropped me off on the Eastern Highway, about 35 miles from Denver. My voice sounded surprisingly calm. I need help. Are you hurt? That was his first question. No, just soaked and cold. I see your signal. Don't move. I'll be there in 10 minutes. I waited in the pouring rain, watching cars speed by. About 8 minutes later, a black pickup truck pulled over to the side of the road. Ethan got out with a large umbrella. He calmly walked over and held the umbrella over me, keeping his distance. There's dry clothes and a thermos of hot tea in the car, he said, as if rescuing people in the middle of the night was his normal job. Are you sure you're not hurt at all? I looked at this man, who had treated me with respect from the very beginning and who, anticipating trouble, was prepared to help without asking unnecessary questions. And for the first time in a very long time, I genuinely smiled. I'm okay now, I said, and we walked to his car. My main phone, the one Mason was tracking, started vibrating with his messages. So, did you learn your lesson? Ready to apologize? Where are you? Answer me right now. I simply turned it off and got into the warm, dry cabin of Ethan's pickup. At that moment, I knew for sure that this was Mason's last mistake in our marriage. It was over. Ethan drove the pickup confidently through the storm, and the rhythmic thump of the wipers soothed my thoughts. I changed into the dry clothes he apparently always kept in the car for emergencies, a pair of simple sweatpants and a hoodie with our company logo. The clothes were too big for me, but they gave me an incredible sense of warmth and security. We're not going home, Ethan said, breaking the silence. Standard protocol in these cases is to first get the person to a safe, neutral location. I nodded silently, understanding that it would be reckless to go back to Mason now. Our company has a contract with the Westlake Hotel downtown, he continued. It has 24/7 security, all entrances are monitored, and they never disclose guest information. This is standard procedure. His professionalism was calming. He wasn't pitying me, he was just competently doing his job, solving a security problem the way he had been trained to. And that was exactly what I needed. My main phone wouldn't stop vibrating. When we stopped at a traffic light, I saw dozens of missed calls and a flood of messages from Mason. Their tone quickly shifted from annoyance to panic and rage. There was everything. Where are you? This isn't funny anymore, I'm turning around to find you, answer me right now. The last messages were openly threatening. If you called someone, you'll regret it, and I'm coming home. I hope you're there. Ethan glanced at the screen. You should take screenshots of all of this, he said calmly. It could be very important later. At the hotel, Ethan did everything quickly and efficiently. He checked me in on the corporate account, escorted me to the room, and performed what he called a standard security check of the premises. When he was finished, he took a post right outside my door. "I'll stay here to make sure there are no threats," he explained. "If you need anything, call from the room phone. My team is tracking your husband's location via his car's GPS. It's a standard procedure to assess potential danger." I was struck by how he maintained absolute professionalism, giving me the exact protection I needed. No unnecessary emotions, no taking advantage of my vulnerability, just clear boundaries and competence. That night in the hotel, I made two firm decisions: to file for divorce immediately and to request a restraining order. In the morning, Ethan connected me with Amy, a lawyer who specialized in such cases and collaborated with our company. She came directly to the hotel, and she already had the necessary papers ready. "Based on what Ethan told me, we have a solid case for immediate filing," she explained clearly. "The fact that he left you on the highway alone is enough to get a temporary restraining order. But I assume that's not all." For the next few hours, I told Amy everything in detail, about the control, the surveillance, the humiliation. She took careful notes, maintaining the same calm and professional demeanor as Ethan. "We'll need to retrieve your documents and personal belongings," Amy said when I finished. "Are you willing to go back there with a security escort?" The thought of facing Mason terrified me, but I needed my passport and valuables. "I'll organize everything," Ethan intervened. "We'll send a team there during business hours when your husband is likely not home." The next day, Ethan personally led the operation to retrieve my belongings. What they found in the house shocked even him. There were hidden cameras everywhere, including the bathroom. All our electronics had spyware on them. And my personal documents were locked in a safe I didn't even know existed. "This level of surveillance suggests the situation is much more serious than you described," Ethan noted, photographing each discovery. "This will significantly strengthen your position in court." Meanwhile, Mason, realizing I wasn't coming back, tried to block our joint bank accounts. But thanks to Amy's foresight, I had transferred my share of the savings to a new, personal account the day before. What he didn't know was that I had long been following Ethan's advice. Several months ago, he had recommended that I open a separate account that no one would know about as a basic security protocol. The climax came when Mason showed up at my office and demanded a meeting. But the security team, instructed by Ethan, stopped him in the lobby. "Sir, you are not allowed past this point," the guard said. "My wife is in there. I need to talk to her." Mason insisted, raising his voice. "I'm sorry, but without permission, I cannot let you in." "Do you know who I am?" Mason shouted, attracting everyone's attention. "Get Barbara down here, now." I watched it all happen on the surveillance cameras from my office. Ethan stood silently beside me. "This is typical behavior for people of his character when they feel they're losing control," he commented calmly. "We're continuing to document everything." In the end, Mason was escorted out of the building. He left shouting threats and accusations. The entire incident was recorded and added to our case. The court hearing for my petition took place 3 days later. Amy presented all the gathered evidence to the judge: our text messages, camera footage, colleagues' testimonies, and photos of the hidden cameras and spyware Ethan had found in our house. But the most powerful argument was a discovery made by a financial expert on Amy's team. It turned out Mason had been secretly transferring money from my personal inheritance account to his offshore accounts. He wasn't just controlling my every cent, he was systematically stealing from me. Mason came to court with his lawyer. He looked like a concerned husband who was suffering from his wife's problems. His lawyer painted a picture in which I was a woman on the verge of a nervous breakdown who was also having an affair with the head of security at her job. My client was only trying to protect his wife from herself, the lawyer argued. All these control measures were put in place solely out of concern for her unstable state. The judge, a man in his 50s with a stern look, silently reviewed all the presented materials. When he looked up, his face showed no doubt. Based on the irrefutable evidence, he declared in a firm voice, the court issues a temporary restraining order for a period of 120 days. The defendant is prohibited from approaching the plaintiff, her home, or her workplace within 800 feet. Additionally, all surveillance equipment must be removed from the home within 24 hours under the supervision of court representatives. Mason's face twisted first in shock, then in pure fury. He had been convinced until the end that his performance as a concerned husband would persuade the judge. "This isn't over, Barbara," he yelled at us as we left. "You'll regret this." Two court bailiffs immediately stepped between us, and Ethan quickly led me to the car. News of our separation spread instantly. Mason immediately launched a campaign to tarnish my reputation. He told all our mutual acquaintances that I had cheated on him with Ethan, that I had become emotionally unstable because of work, and that I had left him for no reason. Some people believed him. But many others, especially the women who had noticed his strange behavior at parties before, reached out to me with words of support. The company temporarily placed me in a secure residential complex for top managers. On that first night in my new apartment, knowing that Mason couldn't reach me, I slept soundly for the first time in a long time. It felt like the downpour on the highway had washed away not just the dirt but the last remnants of fear. I was free. Going back to work without Mason's constant control was like taking a first breath after a long period of suffocation. My team was only told that I was dealing with a personal security matter, but their support was evident in everything: a cup of coffee left on my desk, colleagues' willingness to cover for me at evening meetings. Ethan updated the security protocols throughout the building. Now, access to my office required a biometric scan, and additional security guards were discreetly stationed in the lobby and parking lot. All these changes were presented as a planned enhancement of overall company security. In this way, my situation remained private, but I felt protected. But Mason wasn't giving up. Within the first month, he violated the restraining order 3 times. First, he sent me flowers at the office with a note: "I forgive you. Come back." Then, I noticed him at a cafe across from our building. He was just sitting and watching my office window until security intervened. The third time, he was found in our parking garage. Each incident was documented and forwarded to our lawyer and the police. "This is classic behavior," Amy explained to me. "When they lose control, they often escalate. Each of these violations only strengthens our position in court and helps to extend the restraining order. We're just gathering facts." Throughout all this, Ethan continued to provide professional support. Despite Mason's absurd accusations, he maintained strict professional boundaries. He never touched on the personal side of the case, focusing solely on threat assessment. "Your ex-husband's behavior is predictable," he would say, reviewing the reports. "This allows us to anticipate risks and act proactively." His cool, business-like approach helped me learn to separate emotions from the need to act strategically, and this proved invaluable in the months that followed. Gradually, I began to reconnect with the friends Mason had isolated me from. My college friend, Olivia, flew in from Boston for the weekend, and when I told her my story, she was horrified. "I felt something was wrong when you almost stopped communicating," she said as we sat in my new, safe apartment. "We used to share everything, and then your answers became so short and dry. I should have been more persistent." "Mason convinced me you were a bad influence," I admitted. "He was reading our messages and criticizing every word you said." Reconnecting with my sister, Chloe, was just as important. It turned out she had gone through a divorce with a manipulative husband herself a couple of years ago. That's why Mason was so afraid of our communication. "He saw me as a threat," Chloe said when I told her everything. "I would have seen him for what he was right away." But the most emotional reunion was with my mother. It turned out that after I left, her condition had worsened, and she had even been hospitalized. All that time, Mason had hidden the messages from the doctors, supposedly protecting me from unnecessary stress, but in reality, he was isolating me even more. When I finally went to see her in Colorado Springs for a whole week, with discreet security watching over me, she cried for a long time. I felt something was wrong, she confessed. You became so cautious with your words. Why didn't you say anything? I asked. I tried, honey. 3 times. But each time, you defended him so much that I was afraid of losing you completely. That's how manipulators work. They make you defend them from the people who love you. When our divorce proceedings began, new shocking details of his financial schemes came to light. It turned out that Mason had not only stolen my inheritance but had also taken out loans in my name and drained credit cards I didn't even know existed. Amy's team even found evidence that he had done similar things to his ex-girlfriend. Financial abuse always leaves a trail, Amy explained to me. In court, these are the most undeniable pieces of evidence. Mason's parents also tried to intervene. First, they invited me to lunch to discuss paths to reconciliation. I refused, relaying my answer through Amy. Then they tried to come to my office, but security wouldn't let them in. After that, his mother left me a voicemail. Your husband made mistakes, but destroying a marriage over it is too much, she said. All couples argue. Running to lawyers instead of solving problems is a sign of immaturity. I deleted the message without replying. In that moment, I realized that the guilt Mason had cultivated in me for so long had finally disappeared. I was confident in my decision. The most unexpected support came from Mason's ex-girlfriend, Jessica. After hearing about our divorce from mutual acquaintances, she found a way to contact me through Amy. I went through the same nightmare you did, she wrote. Surveillance, constant criticism, isolation. When I finally left him, he stalked me for several months. I still regret not going to the police and just disappearing. You're doing the right thing by documenting his every move. Her words were a powerful validation of my actions and helped me fight the lies Mason was spreading in our social circle, portraying me as unstable and overly emotional. Ethan's team continued to document every new outrageous act by Mason. He started casually appearing at my favorite restaurants, at conferences where I was scheduled to speak, and once he even followed the corporate car that was taking me to the airport. He's systematically testing your boundaries, Ethan concluded, reviewing the latest report. With each appearance, he's trying to show that no security measures can stop him for long. Despite Mason's attempts to intimidate me, I wasn't going to hide. When our biggest client, Apex Solutions, requested a personal presentation for their board of directors, Mason somehow found out. He contacted their marketing director, hinting that I was emotionally unstable, and offered to present in my place. But the marketing director, Laura, called me directly. Your ex-husband contacted me with some concerning statements, she said frankly. I wanted to hear your side before I made any judgments. I explained the situation honestly and without unnecessary emotion. Laura listened in silence, and then she offered me unexpected support. My sister went through something similar, she said. We'll increase security at the presentation and guarantee he won't get into the building. The board of directors is looking forward to your ideas, not his. That presentation was a real breakthrough for me. Knowing that Mason had tried to ruin everything, I gave the best and most confident speech of my life. In the end, Apex Solutions not only signed the contract but doubled its value. I was photographed with their CEO for our corporate magazine, and an article about the campaign we developed was picked up by leading industry journals. For the first time in a long time, I was at the center of professional attention without Mason's oppressive presence behind my back. This feeling of freedom was exhilarating. Little by little, I started to return to the hobbies Mason had deemed frivolous. I joined a hiking club to explore the trails of the Rocky Mountains and picked up my camera again. Each of these activities felt like a return of a small part of myself. For Christmas, instead of the noisy parties Mason always insisted on, I stayed home with my mom. We cooked, watched old movies, and talked a lot. You're back to your old self, she said, watching me laugh. I can see it in your eyes. And I knew she was right. A heavy weight of constant self-control had lifted from my shoulders. I was relearning to enjoy simple things without fear of judgment. There were still many challenges ahead, but I was absolutely certain, leaving Mason was not just the right decision, it was a vital one. A year after that night, I stood at the window of my apartment and watched a thunderstorm roll in over Denver. The rain that had once witnessed my humiliation now seemed like a symbol of cleansing and new life. Our divorce had been finalized 3 months ago. Despite all of Mason's attempts to draw out the process, the evidence of his financial schemes gathered by Amy sealed the case in my favor. I got my inheritance back and received compensation for all his fraudulent activities. But the biggest consequence for Mason was not the loss of money, it was the complete collapse of his reputation. In Denver's closed and respectable business world, where image is everything, the details of the court ruling spread like wildfire. The official documents confirming his financial fraud and my restraining order became public knowledge. The story of the charming and successful heir who turned out to be a cruel manipulator became a cautionary tale whispered about at business lunches and country clubs. Clients were the first to react. A major investment group that Mason had been negotiating with for several months withdrew its offer without explanation. Business partners who valued stability and predictability began to distance themselves. His word, once respected, now only aroused suspicion. The flawless facade he had built for years crumbled before his eyes, revealing not a business genius but a petty tyrant. The final straw was his father's intervention. A man of the old school for whom family reputation and business stability were paramount, he summoned Mason to his office. It was not a father-son talk but a cold evaluation from a CEO. He spoke not of morals but of losses. Of lost contracts. Of the fact that the Wilson name was now associated with scandal, not success. "You become a problem for this business," he concluded. That same day, he removed Mason from all management positions. The condition for his return was tough and non-negotiable. Mason had to immediately start a course of psychotherapy and agree to have all his financial operations, both personal and corporate, go through a strict audit by the family's CFO. The alternative was a complete termination and a loss of access to family assets. My career skyrocketed after the divorce. Just 2 months later, I was appointed Chief Marketing Officer, the youngest in the history of Innovate Dynamics. The event attracted press attention, and several major publications wrote articles about my projects and leadership style. "This promotion is a recognition not only of your talent but of your incredible resilience," Robert told me when he offered the new position. "The way you handled a personal crisis without losing your professionalism says more about you than any report." In my new role, I launched a corporate support program for employees facing domestic abuse. We started collaborating with local organizations to provide confidential legal and psychological assistance, security protocols, and even emergency housing. When the first employee used this program and was able to safely leave their partner, I realized that my most painful experience had turned into something more. It had become a source of hope and real help for others, something I had once so desperately sought myself. Over time, my relationship with Ethan evolved from purely professional to a strong, respectful friendship. We continued to work together on improving the company's security system, and, contrary to all of Mason's fabrications, there was never anything between us but professionalism. When I once found the courage to ask him about those accusations, he simply replied, "In our line of work, there's a clear code of ethics. Using a client's vulnerability is a gross violation of it." It was his unwavering professionalism in my darkest hour that became the foundation upon which our friendship could later grow, once everything had settled. Eventually, my work extended beyond Innovate Dynamics. I was invited to business conferences where I spoke about how to recognize the signs of psychological control in a professional environment and how to help employees facing this problem. I never shared the details of my personal story, focusing on the work aspects, but people understood anyway. After one such speech, a manager from another large company approached me. "You just described my daughter's marriage," she said quietly. I felt something was wrong for a long time but couldn't find the words. "Thank you, you've given me both the understanding and the tools to help her." It was moments like these that convinced me I had chosen the right path. My personal trauma had turned into knowledge that could save others from similar pain. For months after the divorce, I happened to run into Mason at a downtown Denver restaurant. I was there with colleagues, celebrating another successful project. He walked in with some business partners. He looked different. His former self-assurance was gone. Our eyes met. For a second, something in my chest tightened, an echo of old fear, but it immediately released. And an unexpected feeling took its place. Compassion. Not pity, but a sense of compassion for a deeply insecure person who needed power over others to feel strong. I calmly returned to my conversation with my colleagues. Later, as we were leaving, I noticed he was still sitting at his table, watching us but not moving. The restraining order had already expired, but he kept his distance. Perhaps he had finally learned his lesson. That meeting in the restaurant was the final point in my healing. I realized that his power over me had been completely destroyed. Over these years, I've learned several important lessons. I've learned to trust my intuition, which had been warning me of the danger from the very beginning. I've understood that setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's self-care. And I've also learned that by sharing my story, I turned my pain and shame into a source of strength for others. One evening, I sat on my balcony, watching the sun set behind the Rocky Mountains, and felt a deep sense of peace. Not because my life had become perfect, but because I had reclaimed it. The woman Mason had tried to break had only become stronger and wiser. That downpour on the dark highway washed away all illusions, leaving only the truth. What Mason had intended as my ultimate punishment ended up being my liberation. His power ended that night, and my journey to true freedom began.